The mangrove community is the best, right? Incredible. So I'm Jen Morris, CEO of the Nation Conservancy. I'm thrilled to be here with my co-host here, Ambition Loop. We have so many people in the room. I want to thank HSBC, of course. Salesforce is really getting us started. You guys have made so much progress since we launched this. Incredible. But we got a lot more to do, right? We know we've lost 1 million hectares of mangroves since 1996. That's too much. In this room today, you have an incredible brain trust. And no one in here needs to be convinced that mangroves are important. The most important thing is that we get down to business. We use our collective brain power, our collective ideas for innovative financing. How do we address the need to get money to communities on the front lines, protecting mangroves, restoring mangroves by 2030 so we can achieve these goals? Let's not talk in platitudes. Let's get it done. You guys here have the time, the open moment to make that happen. So I want to just really celebrate the panelists that are going to be up here today and all of you in this room. But let's come up with concrete actions. I go to so many events where people are talking here about, yes, we need this. Get some action done. This is the time is now, as the theme of this COP is, right? Implementation. That's all I'm going to say. Get to work.
Thank you so much, Jen. If you want to learn more about the Mangrove Breakthrough, I can hardly think of someone better than a good friend and colleague of mine, Carlos Correa, Senior Fellow from Conservation International and Ambassador of the Mangrove Breakthrough. Carlos, please join me.
Thank you, Ben. Buenos días a todos. Oh, I think everyone speaks Spanish here. Great. Please raise your hand to speak Spanish. Okay. Ignacio, I know. You speak a bit Spanish. Okay. Thank you very much for being here. I'm so happy to be here in New York after so many events, but especially after COP28 in Dubai, where we had a great time. So it's an honor to speak with you today about the incredible progress we have made through the Mangrove Breakthrough since COP28. As you know, mangroves are not just coastal trees. They are vital nature-based solutions that protect our coastlines, store carbon, support biodiversity. I suppose you knew that. And sustain millions of livelihoods. However, despite their importance, mangroves have been undervalued and underfunded for far too long. So the Mangrove Breakthrough has set ambitious goals. Who can give me one of those goals? Ron, on you. Who can give me one? One goal of the Mangrove Breakthrough. How those? And then double protection. And then restore half. And then sustainable finance. 4 billion by 2030. So that's good. So today I want to give you an update on our progress toward these targets, especially how we have been working to break down the silos that have traditionally hindered action between policy, finance, and on-the-ground implementation. So first, let me highlight the progress we have made in government engagement. Since COP28, how many governments have engaged? 29, not ROA. 29 national and subnational governments have officially endorsed the Mangrove Breakthrough, demonstrating a strong commitment to protecting and restoring this vital ecosystem. This is a powerful signal that mangroves are gaining recognition they deserve at the highest levels of policy. And then, in addition to this, the NDC Task Force, an initiative led by partners, including the Pew Charitable Trust and other members of the Global Mangrove Alliance. The UNFCCC High-Level Champions supports countries in the development of clear, science-based, and measurable national determined contributions. The NDC Task Force brings together policy and mangrove experts from in-country and international environmental organizations to provide technical expertise and coordinate knowledge sharing for Mangrove Breakthrough countries that they translate their mangrove positive values into the 2025 NDCs. And I want you to remember that next year at COP30 in Belém from Brazil, we will have the last update of the NDCs just before the 2030 goal. So listen to that. We have one shot for the NDCs. And our silent heroes, the mangroves, will be there again. We need to work together for that. Another significant development since COP28 is the progress we have made on establishing the Mangrove Breakthrough Secretariat. And I'm pleased to announce that Ambition Loop will serve as a host for this secretariat, providing a dedicated platform to coordinate the activities, partnerships, and communications necessary to drive forward the Mangrove Breakthrough Ambition goal. And in parallel, we have established an advisory council to guide the strategic direction of the Mangrove Breakthrough. This council consists of key experts and leaders from various sectors, including government, finance, conservation, and indigenous communities, ensuring that the initiative remains inclusive, responsive, and impactful. The Secretariat, together with the Advisory Council, will play a vital role in maintaining momentum, facilitating cross-sector collaboration, and ensuring accountability as we work toward our 2030 targets. In conclusion, we have made significant progress since COP28. I'm very proud of this amazing team that have been working. All the organizations, everyone thinking toward the same goals and challenges, having a lot of meetings every week, since 7 a.m., until 11 or 12. And the Mangrove Breakthrough has successfully brought governments to the private sector and civil society to focus on the immense value of mangroves. With 29 governments endorsing the initiative, the establishment of the NDC Task Force and the Advisory Council, and the leadership of the Ambition Loop as host of the Secretariat, we've built a strong foundation for the next phase of this journey. As we look ahead to COP16 in Cali, are you coming? I'm from Colombia, very close to Cali. Please come. We will be talking about climate change, biodiversity, conservation, but also more important, about mangroves. And then you will have to dance salsa. Huh? So next month in Cali, then Baku in Azerbaijan, and then at COP30 in Brazil next year. This presents a pivotal moment to highlight the tangible impacts of the Mangrove Breakthrough. COP30 will provide us with an opportunity not to only reflect on the progress made, but also to scale up our ambitions. By then, we aim to see ever greater financial commitments unlocked, stronger policies in place, and more hectares of mangrove restored and protected. It will be a time to demonstrate that through this initiative, we are turning promises into action and action into results. Our focus leading into COP30 will be on strengthening partnerships, ensuring that financial flows reach communities on the front lines, and continuing to push for the inclusion of mangroves in global climate and biodiversity goals. So COP30 will be a key platform for galvanizing even more international support, unlocking the full 4 billion target, and accelerating efforts to achieve the 2030 vision. With continued collaboration, innovation, and commitment, I am confident that we will arrive at COP30 with powerful stories of success and momentum, showing the world that we are on the path to securing the future of 15 million hectares of mangroves, ensuring this ecosystem thrive for generations to come. So let's do it together. Let's keep doing it together, that we will do it. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Carlos and Jen again for setting such a great stage for our conversation today. I think the need for mangroves is clear, the momentum of the Mangrove Breakthrough is clear, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to hear from experts from different sectors around how they're engaging and supporting this very ambitious initiative. I'd like to welcome the moderator of our panel to the stage. He is the high-level climate champion for the COP26 presidency and the founder of Ambition Loop. Nigel Topping, please join me.
Great, thanks, Ben. I'm going to do some musical microphones. Well, thanks, Ben. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Carlos. It's really exciting to be here. And actually, Carlos, thank you for the big shout out for Ambition Loop. I have to say, we're feeling really humbled to be given the responsibility to support and host the Secretariat. And I really recognize that this is a really powerful community with many, many people working towards the same goals. And when we launched the idea of breakthroughs in the run-up to COP26, we realized that we needed to get much more tangible so that we can drive to action. And I have a little secret, the Mangroves Breakthrough is my favorite breakthrough. But for two reasons. One, we talked a lot about radical collaboration, and the breadth of stakeholders across the private sector, major international NGOs, local communities, governments, national and subnational, is incredible, but also the absolute clarity, 15 million hectares, $4 billion, 15 million hectares, $4 billion. And those two are super important. What are we actually trying to do, and how much money needs to be mobilized to do it? So I'm not a mangroves expert. I'm probably, unlike most people in the room, so for me, the thrill of this session is I get to learn a lot from many people who are working in very practical ways on the different aspects of the solution to break through silos. So we're going to really have the whole system in the room here. So let me welcome to the stage our panelists. I have Her Excellency Hiba Al-Sehi, the Assistant Undersecretary for Biodiversity and Marine Life Sector in the UAE Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. Your Excellency. We have Jenny McInnes, the Global Head of Policy and Partnerships at HSBC. Dr. Ure Yarkpavolo, Executive Director and CEO of Liberia's Environmental Protection Agency. Who do we have from instead of Monique? Monique's here. Great. Monique. We have Monique Barreto Galvao, the VP of RARE's Brazil office. Okay, yeah, good. You're fine. Thank you. I was worried you weren't here, but great, you made it. We have Emily Averna, the Program Officer for Land Restoration at the Bezos Earth Fund. Emily. And Naomi Morenzoni, the Senior Vice President of Climate and Innovation Philanthropy at Salesforce. Great. So this is kind of the definition of breaking through silos, right? We really have the whole system in the room. Let me start with Her Excellency Al-Sehi from the UAE. Jen challenged us to get specific. So Your Excellency, I'd love to hear a bit about the specifics of your current national policies on mangroves and how they're important in terms of mobilizing other actors for the conservation and restoration of mangrove ecosystems in the UAE.
Thank you very much, Nigel. And let me first thank you for inviting the UAE to be a panelist here among such an amazing crowd. Thank you very much. And let me tell you a little bit of a story about the mangroves when it comes to the perspective of the UAE. So we were lucky in the UAE that we have started with the leadership 50 plus years ago. With Sheikh Zayed being the president of the UAE, he was recognized as the environmental man. So he won so many awards because he was a person at that time that was leading a lot of countries in the region to protect the environment. And with us in the UAE, we look at mangroves as our soldiers in the sea. So we have been protecting mangrove for such a long time, and we've been trying to help other countries around us as well to protect their habitats and their mangroves. And we set so many laws in the UAE when it comes to the mangroves protection. But in COP26, as we were reviewing our NDC, we have announced that we are restoring the mangrove forests that we have in the UAE, and we are planting 100 million mangroves. And
What was that number? That's a big number. Just say that again.
that's 100 million mangroves, and we're going to be restoring the mangrove areas in the UAE. So that was in COP26, and then we moved to COP27, and there is another achievement that we've announced, the Mangrove Alliance for Climate. And the reason why we announced that in cooperation with Indonesia is because we felt, okay, so the UAE is doing quite a lot of work and we have the expertise, but what about the other countries? So we needed to get the governments that are that basically have mangroves or would like to restore mangroves, and to get that, to establish that platform to exchange expertise and exchange sciences and that political will to protect the mangrove areas. And that was in COP27, where we worked hand in hand with the Indonesian government, and we had 8 members at the time. In COP28, we were, right now we're 15 members, and we're all government members, of course, working with a lot of non-state actors. We have announced that we are having a formal partnership with the Mangrove Breakthrough, which is a great step for MAC to work with the Mangrove Breakthrough to make sure that we are all working together and leveraging from each other's expertise and goals towards achieving one main world goal. We have also announced that we will be building in Indonesia an international center for mangroves. And this center, which we are fully funding as well in Indonesia, is going to be a center where all the international scientists and experts can use to better our understanding when it comes to mangroves. And of course that the main reason for that as well is because without the science and without the information and the data, we will not be able to protect mangroves as we could to mitigate the effects, especially of climate change today and what will be happening in the years to come. So hopefully this year we will start building the center. We have finalized the design over there, and we're going to be starting to build the center today. So I think the UAE and what we're trying to do is keep that momentum going when it comes to mangrove protection and get everybody on board to help us globally protect this beautiful, beautiful species and their ecosystems.
Great. Thank you, Your Excellency. And I think really interesting examples of the way that collaboration is starting to converge. You know, you talk, so you've got the MAC bringing the countries together and then joining the other actors through the breakthrough. And of course, Razan Al-Mubarak, the COP28 high-level action champion, I know is a huge champion for that breakthrough, given also her role as president of the IUCN. Can you just briefly, just to end, Carlos talked about the importance of embedding this sort of ambition and commitments in international processes, so biodiversity action plans, climate NDCs for the upcoming process. Just say a little bit about how the UAE is thinking about embedding these commitments into those plans as part of multilateral processes.
Of course. Striking a balance between climate neutrality and the conservation of nature is one of our top priorities, making sure that we have that in the policies internationally as well as nationally, and bringing all the stakeholders, that the private sectors, the societies as well on board is crucial for this process. So the UAE was quite active in the negotiation for the coming Montreal framework, making sure as well mangrove and mangrove values is taken into consideration. And in the UAE, we have updated our MBSAP, and we've announced this in COP28 that the UAE was one of the first countries to finalize its update for MBSAP to be aligned with the coming Montreal. And we have a main goal in that MBSAP just for the species conservation and the habitat restoration, among which a priority species is and an ecosystem is mangroves, of course. But again, as a government, I would like to reiterate, we cannot do it alone. We need to get all the parties together. We need to get the societies together, and we need to hear from them. And we also need to tap into their funding as well to help all the communities come together for better projects.
Perfect intro to next speaker, Jenny McInnes from HSBC. Jenny, HSBC is very clear about the role of nature in your transition plans, and have played a key role in the Mangrove Breakthrough's finance roadmap. So just tell us a little bit about what you see as the role of finance, and the kind of instruments and structures we're going to need to get to that $4 billion. It's not like there's a big pot that we just dip into for $4 billion, right? It needs some problem solving.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Nigel. It's great to be part of this radical collaboration, the Mangrove Breakthrough, because what we need, and you spoke about it so eloquently, is radical collaboration and convening of all of the different actors that are going to need to participate in this financing, because it's a classic situation of nothing's agreed until everything's agreed when you're operating at that scale, right? And mangroves are great because they are a charismatic mega ecosystem, if you like. Joke for the biologists in the room. Not enough biologists in the room, clearly, or just not funny enough. They're iconic. People love mangroves, and they produce a myriad of benefits and opportunities that all have a revenue stream attached to them, potentially. And so what we need to do is understand how we bring some of those things together. So as you say, we've committed to integrating nature across our net zero transition planning. We're doing that in terms of financing, in terms of risk, in terms of our policy frameworks. But we need help because these investments are much more challenging. 10, 15 years ago, we were collaborating. I was in the UK government. We were using our international climate finance to collaborate around sustainable infrastructure projects. They were first of a kind. They were difficult. They had maybe 2 or 3 project participants. They are comparatively easy compared to what we're trying to do here. And actually, we need to really think about the scale of intervention. We are talking about mangroves through the Mangrove Breakthrough, but we need to look at what are the drivers of nature loss and degradation here, and how do we use those revenue streams that might be coming in to ensure that they're all pushing in the same direction and those incentives are aligned. So that's what's interesting to us as HSBC. And we've done a number of relevant, equivalent kinds of financing that I think we're really keen to understand. How do you replicate or translate some of that to this context? So, we've done a number of blue bonds, for example, but they're not, well, they all follow the industry guidance in terms of allocation, but most of it, I think, is focused on the water system rather than on deep green, deep blue investment. But that's important, as I said, I think like 20% of wastewater is treated in Asia, and polluted wastewater is a major driver of ecosystem degradation, including of marine ecosystems. So it's really important that we look to address that through blue bonds, but that's not going to be enough on its own necessarily. And so how do we stack all these different opportunities, supply chain financing, trade finance, but also within that upstream policy enabling environment that's critical for any of us to do the work that we need to do. So, what we're hoping to do with Mangrove Breakthrough is identify some specific jurisdictions where all of the stars align to see whether we can construct a transaction that helps us to crowd in the scale of financing needed. And So HSBC, a traditional bank, a global bank, we've got really interesting levers, but we've also got constraints. Long tenor lending is very difficult for big banks. Small scale lending is very difficult for big banks. And if you look at the participants, the people who need to benefit from this finance on the ground to actually safeguard that asset for the long term, they need to be paid, it's microfinance often, over a 20-year period. Well, HSBC is not going to do that straight up, but we might do that working with microfinance institutions. We might do that by working with local financial institutions who will take some of that risk and will take other bits of it. So it's all about trying to understand how the different participants can come together to make sure that our varying risk and return expectations stack up and create the potential financing opportunity.
So is that then become one of the key roles of the finance task force of the Mangroves Breakthrough, to actually do that convening? Because as you said, it's complex. If you don't have the right stakeholders in the room at the beginning, then you end up making design mistakes which are very hard to undo downstream, right?
Yeah, definitely. And a bank can't really do that convening. But, we've been having great conversations through the Financial Services Task Force, and we did some work with the Mangrove Breakthrough last year, feeding into the finance roadmap. And there's a number of banks in that task force that we want to do the first of a kind transaction. We'd be happy to do it together, but can we sit down together and talk about a deal? No, that's an antitrust risk. So we need a convener, an MDB, a government, an NGO, to help us to understand what good would look like and where we could potentially play in that kind of construct. And so, yeah, convening is really critical.
Right, and the involvement of and the fairness in terms of share of proceeds, the local community is going to be really important. We'll hear more about that from Monique later, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So if I just give you one quick example, that we've just done this first of a kind World Bank forest restoration bond. So obviously it's terrestrial, but it's definitely a model that could be replicated in a mangrove environment. And it's working with Microsoft as a off-taker of high-quality carbon credits, World Bank, obviously, concessional finance and de-risking, but also that convening and ensuring the benefit sharing. So it's that kind of construct that could potentially work here.
And it seems to me that part of this radical collaboration is going to have to be about sharing what's working. I mean, Anne-Marie and Susan from FST Africa would just tell me about the recent success in Sierra Leone, which and also bringing things in from adjacent sectors. I mean, we're still allowed to talk about terrestrial successes, right? Because there's things to learn. Great. Well, we'll come back to communities and other sources of finance in a minute. But I want to go to Dr. Jakobovolo from Liberia. We talked earlier about the importance of embedding in NDCs, and you've already done that in your 2021 NDC, so you're ahead of the game. So tell us a little bit about how you managed to do that and how you've seen embedding the targets in your NDCs affecting implementation on the ground.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I want to say thank you to CI for squeezing me in here. And by coming here now, I'm very much excited. Very important question. And I'll start with this, really, on the mangrove thing here. Sometimes we pay attention, we need to save the mangrove. But we really need to help the mangrove to save us, right? I think you understand that concept. We help the mangrove to save us. How do we do that? The nationally determined contribution is a big deal. Before you achieve anything, you need to set a goal, you need to set a target. Since, in fact, Liberia is maybe the third country in Africa, West Africa, with the longest coastline, 350 some more miles, and we have all these inland rich sources of mangrove all across the country. So we thought to put some ambition in there. And do we have the money? No, but let's put it in it. Then we look for the money, right? Let the numbers be there. So we want to set restored, bring back to life about 30%. We want to make sure that two critical areas, Lepiso and also the Marshall wetland. These are really large wetlands in Liberia, and they're really supporting the economy. Let's try to make sure those areas are protected. So we thought about it that way, so that we have numbers in there, we have specific focus in there, and then we start to work it out. And we're doing some work about it. We're going very far. We're trying to gazette the Marshall wetland as well as the Lepiso area. where there are conflict, like the Butterwheel waterfall area, where there are conflict, we intervene. Because previously, other government thought the area was for the government. The local people resisted. So when we got there, we told the local people, it's for you. And now they recognize the ownership is for them. To negotiate with them become very easy as to what strategy we can put in place to make sure that area is protected. So, but we have the other NDC coming up, working on it. We're going to take it up to another level. Do we have challenges? Yes, we do have challenges. And there I think we'll go for the next question as to how we can be able to work on some of those challenges, especially challenges surrounding poverty, why people are degrading wetland, why are they constructing the wetland. As a researcher myself, I've been involved with them. I go into community, I ask, why are you here, and what you're doing. And people talk to me about it, and we write data. So we get a lot of information as to how we can combine forces.
Great. I think you illustrate really clearly the importance in terms of NDC of specificity, sort of geographically and quantitatively, but also that it's not just about that, it's also about the soft and hard regulatory environment in terms of engaging with and rights of communities, which we'll hear more about later. But say a little bit more about, and again, this is why we say we have to break the silos, because it's one thing to say governments must do this, governments do this, governments must do this, but what do you need to see from other non-state actors, whether the community or the private sector or international NGOs, to be able to support you in implementing your bold targets which you've embedded in NDCs?
Yeah, so we said, you put your money to where your mouth is. So if we know that if we don't save the mangrove, we drive the mangrove to extinction, we drive ourselves to extinction, if we realize that fight, then we take it serious. Then every little money we have, we'll try to support good effort. Because if people are cutting down mangrove, women are cutting down mangrove to be able to, say, make coal, or they want to cut it down to dry fish, there got to be alternative for them. If you tell them not to cut a mangrove, is there solar innovation, solar dryers, so they're able to dry their fish much more efficiently? That costs money. And there where we need to, look up to people who can afford and who care deeply about this stuff to try to help. We are trying to do something in Liberia, because right now we are actually lifted our entire national NDC into the government agenda, about $500 million. Do we have that money? No. Government, what, EPA, $1 billion, $500 million? We say yes, but we'll try to look for the money, because if we get it, it will support the agriculture, it will support the fishery, it will support different sectors of the economy, not just EPA. So where your mouth is, there where you put your money.
And you talk about fish dryers. I don't understand the technology, but it strikes me as important, not just to always assume that there's a carbon credit mechanism is the only mechanism for mobilizing finance, and finance that flows maybe from local banks to local SMEs for productive uses as part of a more holistic thinking seems really important. So thank you for bringing in that great example. So let's then move on to Monique from Rare in Brazil to talk more about.
I am Monique.
I had the whole plan of everyone sitting in the
I was
right
the late
order.
one. Yeah.
So thank you. I saw a little look of panic there. I was like, what? I haven't even asked the question yet. Why are you panicking? So right now I'm panicking. So Monique, we've touched on the importance of engagement with and the right relationship between local communities and big mangrove projects. Tell us a little bit about the new mangrove legislation in Brazil and how it transforms the legal protection and the way that the community can feel confident in engaging with these kind of projects.
Yeah, it's a good question, because Brazil actually has 10% of the mangrove of all the world. I think it's behind Indonesia with 20, right? It means that there's 1.4 million hectares of mangrove in the country. And to be honest, 90% of our mangrove are already protected under the legal legislation. We have the National Conservation Unity that was started back 2000, and everything is beautiful in paper, but in reality is not functionable. So I think that's one challenge that we are trying to work is to I'll give some examples. In Pará State, which is going to host the next COP in Belém, 14 marine protect areas, just to have the management plans in place. So, and there is a lot of funding to create new protect areas and lack funding to manage the areas. And it's not possible to manage, like, I'll give another parallel because I think it's good to make these parallels. Like the state of Pará, just one state out of the 26, is the size of 4 countries such as Philippines, for instance. It's huge. And it's impossible to manage just providing, I would say, the responsibility just for NGO or just for government or just for the community. Indeed, is a collaboration is the key, but it should have an actor or a stakeholder that could manage and catalyze this change because of different interests between those community members. So bring into reality in terms of action, right? So one work that we are working with ICMB, which is an arm of Ministry of Environment, is to help them to set up the management bodies. It's really simple to bring the community. Sometimes the community is really far from the places, and how they meet every, 3 months, right? It's hard because they need to stop catching fish or to go to the meeting, how they go to the meeting. So it's really simple challenges that they face because they lack of access even for registration to get the period of no season fishing, for instance. In July, we celebrate the 26th July, the International Day of Protection of Mangrove. And for 4 years, we have been mobilizing community leaders for a campaign named Green July campaign. Like you have the September yellow, right? The October blue. The idea is the same, the Green July campaign. And actually, each MPA received $1,000 to mobilize the community to make the awareness about the Amazon mangrove, because everybody talk about Amazon forest, but lack of information in the Amazon mangrove. And they are working this awareness. Is not us as rare. We are working with capacity building and make them lead these campaigns in the field. So this is one of the action. And it's not just with the community members, but also with the municipalities, with our Coastal 500 network, and bring those networks of women, of youth, of community leaders, of mayors together to speak the same language and understand that the goal is the same for the conservation itself. This is the key of changing impact in the field.
I think you did a really good job of explaining that whilst big headline policy commitments, even embedded in NDCs, are necessary, they're not enough, right? You have to get into the real detail of governance and not just governance, but how to get people to turn up to meetings, right? If you want governance to be effective, people have to be able to do that. Just one last, you mentioned briefly that next year and the fact that with the COP being in Brazil, and for most of the world, they think of Brazil and nature, they think of the Amazon, and so they think of terrestrial forests. What can this community do to make sure that the mangroves in Brazil are very much on people's minds as they think about mobilizing finance and solutions and involving communities?
Sure. It's bring the awareness about the power of the mangrove in capture carbon sequestration. We don't have the measurement. We have theory about, from 5 to 10, 2 to 8 times more than traditional rainforests, and bring data in order to capture more funding and also invest in people. So we are talking about 500,000 families in Brazil that lives from the mangrove, and to invest on them for their own business, in sustainable business. We have 3 projects that I can raise an example. Project with crab facility, connecting with the monitoring of the mangrove and the monitoring of the crabs together. So for instance, to build this big umbrella of projects, we had to mobilize 10 different stakeholders, including university, government, mayor, local leaders. Another one with oysters as well. Oysters bank was decreasing. There is a seed just in Amazon coast that exists. And the community knocking our door saying, hey, I'm losing my, the capacity of the production of these oysters, what we can do. So it's really investing people and the community members, because we think that the answer maybe is in these rooms, but actually the answer is with them. Sometimes we like to ask them what they need. And maybe they most of the time they have really creative solutions, not us thinking from them, but providing, a pathway for them access small fundings to make a huge impact.
Great, thank you. Really good examples. Emily. Yeah. I'm looking in the right direction this time. Yeah. We've talked a bit about the need for creative financing solutions, and that will, in many cases, require some kind of philanthropic support to projects. Tell us a little bit about what sort of things you consider when you're looking at proposals in terms of the kind of things that you'd be interested in supporting.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really glad that we're having a parallel discussion or a dual discussion, both about the project supply side and the funding side. I've come to think of them as salt and pepper, and it's really hard to have a good meal or a generative, groundbreaking discussion without really fully considering both elements. So I appreciate that composition of this panel. I guess, we're all here because we really want to scale mangrove restoration and protection. And to do that, we have to pay attention to two fundamental kind of sides of the house. The first, on the project supply side, is that, of course, we need to triple, quadruple, just redouble our efforts to find and incubate best-in-class, locally led projects, and we really need to help those local projects grow. But the second thing that we also need to do is do a much better job of creating the structures that allow funding and more varied kinds of funding to come together and to reach those projects on the ground. So I think that's a theme that many of my colleagues have spoken about that we're also very focused on. When we think about kind of the project supply side, there's 5 big things that come to mind for me when evaluating what a really great project looks like. The first is that it's ecologically appropriate, and by that I mean the right species are being used in the right places, using the right locally relevant interventions. A second equally critical point is that the projects are locally owned and led. They are rooted in the vision, the objectives, the priorities, the goals of the people who have skin in the game, the people who live and work in these landscapes. And I think, to be honest, for those 2 reasons, the lack of attention to those 2 critical factors are why we see such really scary die-off rates for a lot of the mangrove efforts that have been funded so far. So we got to go back to basics. A third piece is that we need to see and scan for an ability or a willingness to monitor, not just report, but to really use cutting-edge geospatial tools that allow us to objectively monitor and verify what's happening on the ground. That's especially critical if we want to get beyond philanthropic and grant funding to capital that's return-seeking. We really need that credibility. And I guess the 4th and 5th things that we should evaluate or look for are replicability. So really taking an assessment to see whether the group, the approach, the interventions are things that could be scaled and grown beyond the first project site. And the 5th piece that's kind of interesting is to evaluate what the right size of project is. I think right now, for the restoration space generally, and the mangrove space in particular, there's this real missing middle of projects, the groups that aren't ready to absorb millions or tens of millions of dollars, but that are ready to be on microfinance. That's really hard. That's a big, important gap. And so evaluation is needed to figure out how we find and kind of reach those groups at the missing middle. To flip back then to the other side of the house on the funding piece, there's 4 things that I think we as funders and financiers should evaluate when we're deciding if our interventions are useful. The first is that we should be intentional about designing calls for proposals for local groups to really see themselves in this movement. It's kind of shocking because I think when you get to the ground, a lot of groups are doing activities that are completely relevant for mangrove restoration and protection, but they may not know. The connections aren't so obvious. So that's kind of a first piece. The second piece as funders, when we're running these calls for proposals, it's so important that we crowd in from the very beginning technical assistance to design really strong proposals, and after the fact, to help selected groups absorb and manage the funding effectively. Again, our job isn't done once we've found local groups. The task then is to incubate them, nurture their growth, and continue to crowd more into the space. The third of 4 pieces that we should think about as funders is in our own project design, kind of as Jenny was alluding to, we need to think about how to bring the different elements of the capital stack together. and need to be very intentional from the beginning about layering in and setting groups up to navigate the financial supply chain. Our philanthropy could be a first step in getting groups on to blended finance, concessional finance, big ticket JEF funding, and maybe even commercial investment under the right circumstances. That doesn't happen on its own. So as funders and financiers, we need to help set up those structures. And the fourth and final piece about useful funding approaches that I want to highlight is we need to also be investing in the next generation of local institutions and local project developers to steward these kinds of processes to find, fund, incubate, and monitor local efforts moving forward. That's the kind of legacy and the infrastructure that we should be leaving behind. And I think if we can tackle those first order priorities, maybe by focusing in a few geographies or jurisdictions that are really ready, and we marry these efforts to find the groundswell of local projects with right-sized, demand-responsive funding, we're going to start to make this agenda real on the ground very quickly.
Great, really specific guidance there. I just want to sort of double click on the issue of scale. And one of the things that generally, the difference between retail projects and wholesale funds. And if we want to access bigger pools of capital, and we're seeing some interesting. So just how do you navigate that? The difference between thinking about funding a specific project where you're getting very retail and versus helping create funds with structures that embed some of those criteria.
Yeah, it's an important question, and there's a tension even in the design of it, because I think part of the power and potential of restoration and conservation is that it is so inherently local. It harnesses this infinite force and energy around people's connection to their land. So on the one hand, that is an incredible asset that this movement we're trying to build has. On the other hand, that incredibly localized, fragmented nature can make it very difficult to get things aggregated at the right level where projects are able to kind of be a compelling ticket size to different types of financiers with big funding. So, that's a big tension when we think about the scaling discussion. Two areas that we're focused on to start. One really is this idea of project aggregation. So we view some of these kind of missing middle SMEs or project developers. Those guys are very important aggregators because a lot of the time there's kind of an outgrower model where they're actually the clearinghouse for 300, 400, 500 kind of disparate households or community members or cooperatives that are all steering in a common direction. So we need to find who those aggregating actors are and then redouble on their own growth and expansion too.
Great, thank you so much, Emily. I think, and Naomi, it's a good link to the work that Salesforce has been supporting. Give your support for the breakthrough as part of your larger push towards climate justice and nature-based solutions. Obviously, we can see why mangroves in the sweet spot of the overlap there. Say a little bit about how you envision your support triggering tangible impact, and then maybe we'll come back to the specific question of the finance roadmap and some of the issues around scale.
Yeah, well, so first of all, thank you. How cool is it to be in this room here as a tech company? It's a global tech company. When I'm talking about mangroves usually, and you just start back about why they're the super trees and how cool they are. And trust me, by the end, everyone's like, yep, I'm on board. Okay, I'll do it. But here I'm in with my people. So yay, starting off Climate Week well. So just to level set, as a tech company, we really see the nature and climate crises as twin crises. And if we're going to address one, we have to address the other. And so naturally that brought us to the super trees, the super cool mangroves. And so we think about Salesforce's full capital stack and all of our levers of influence in driving action towards mangroves and towards this blue carbon economy that we think can be developed. So we think of that at the very early stage, pre-development, pilot, projects before they're even bankable for a funder because they're not really sure if it's going to work. We're doing some really cool work with TNC and Sunderban looking at how do we think about using 30 different species in the restoration instead of 2 or 3, really growing that biodiversity, and then being able to replicate that knowledge and bring it to other sites, right? But we're still talking kind of that smaller scale. We have a commitment through 1t.org around 100 million trees that we're going to protect and conserve and restore. And we do that through mangroves. And in large part, we ran an RFP to understand how much was out there. Was there going to be enough? And actually, looked at maybe some gaps. There were some great about the projects that we got in. About 25% of them were bankable. They're ready to go. We were like, okay, great. 75% had a fair amount of work to be done, had needed that technical assistance, but we had that pipeline already to being able to develop, thinking about ways we could go back, using knowledge through things like the principles for high quality blue carbon, thinking about, okay, how do we go back and make sure there's better project logic with it, whether there is better community engagement, all of those pieces there. And then we think about blue carbon, right? So Salesforce has a commitment to 1 million tons of blue carbon that we're going to remove. And the reality is the pipeline is not there. We went to send a market signal. I love what you're talking about, like make a commitment and then build the infrastructure behind it. And being able to do that sort of first mover and say, okay, we're going to do this. We don't know if the market's there or ready. And so thinking about leaning in and investing. We also have a ventures fund. So we invest in climate technology that's going to help us reach our goals. So when you talk about measurement evaluation, or how do we do this monitoring, how do we do remote monitoring of this work? So we bring all of that together, trying to think about all the different ways that we can deploy that full capital stack and invest, and then in projects like the Mangrove Breakthrough, which honestly, when it came to us a few years ago, we were like, oh, this is so great. We signed on, but it was a project being done off of the sides of a bunch of desks of people in this room who thank you for doing that work as part of your side gig. But no one was funding it. And we're like, okay, well, let's fund it. We need to make sure that these organizations who have this amazing potential, we're talking about planetary scale with a very clear price tag, that we can make this work happen. So we funded the Secretariat. So excited to have Ambition Loop on board to do that. But that was the type of work when we think about, as a company, how do we think of all these different types of financing that we have as a company? How do we line them up to make it work behind a single goal? Because that's actually really hard, even within a company. We have all of our own finance streams, but it is not simple to get that to line up with each other. And we're still just one company. So one of the things we actually did last year is we worked with Climate Policy Initiative, and we published a playbook. I don't know how many companies or corporations are in the room. Okay, there's a few of you. Okay, so go download it. It's awesome. It basically is your primer for how do you think about the different levers you have as a company in your climate finance stack. How do you think about the way you raise, manage, and deploy capital in coordination together? Who are your friends you need to make within the company? Who are your buddies that you're going to need to help convince along this process? And then how you can drive that action. So that's one of the things that we've been trying to do to support.
Brilliant. And just one last question, because that's one route to scale, that all those companies in the room join you in making those kind of commitments and figuring out how to deploy their assets. Another route to scale, another thing that I know you've worked on is the finance roadmap. And just say something about what you see as some of the routes to scale in terms of this question of retail versus wholesale and the need for funds.
Yeah, so one of the things that's really attractive to us about the Mangrove Breakthrough is it truly is around breaking down these silos. Every actor in this space has a role to play in protecting and restoring sustainability financing mangroves, right? So whether you are a public sector actor, a government, you are private sector, philanthropic, NGO, there is a very clear role for you to play. But I don't know if that was actually that clear of what those specific roles were. And so one of the first things we did to fund for the Mangrove Breakthrough was the finance roadmap, which basically breaks this down. It says, okay, if you are in this space, here are the different levers and the different financing opportunities there are. Here's how you're going to bring those together. Because we needed to have a really clear idea on how we were going to get to that $4 billion. Because otherwise it was another sort of a great tagline that we can all remember, but the action to make that happen. So it was actually something that we invested in first, even before the Secretariat, to make sure that we could take this ambition that we have and really put that into action right away.
Great, and we'll be able to communicate soon the finance director that we brought on board from a mangrove country to then lead that work. So great. Listen, what a great way to explore breaking down silos, to hear from so many different perspectives from national governments. I think through Carlos, from hearing that subnational governments, of course, have a huge role, especially in some of these countries where the subnational government is responsible for a territory bigger than many national governments. We heard from private finance, philanthropic finance, and of course from the private sector. And actually, of course, we could have had several more voices on the panel. I mean, we could have had community leaders, indigenous leaders, and the scientists, developers. I mean, it's a big tent. So thank you for all of your insights. Really excited now about driving the actions faster and faster to mobilise that 4 billion for the 15 million hectares. And with that, I'd like to ask everyone just to put their hands together to thank our panel.
Everyone, we're not quite finished. Not quite finished. If I can get everyone's attention. If you can hear me, clap once. Hear me, clap twice. All right, thank you. We have one more voice to hear from. I trust everyone's feeling excited. I know you're ready to go and take everything you've learned about mangroves to your conversations throughout the week. But I do want to introduce my good friend and colleague, Ignace Begon, who is the Ocean and Climate Lead Ocean and Coastal Zones Lead from the Climate Champions team and Chair of the Mangrove Breakthrough Council. If I can get everyone's attention, we're going to hear for one more person, and then we will wrap up for today. Thank you. Ignace?
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everyone. I will not be long. Well, first of all, it's really nice to see the baby grows. This is really a collective journey, and when we work together, we can have this type of results. And for me, this is really what I will remember from this session and the work that we are leading collectively on mangrove, is that together we can really be stronger. And in this setup, governments, financial institutions, science, NGO, we are trying to make a breakthrough for mangrove. The second element is what I think we've heard is also a mind shift with the way we are looking at mangrove. There is many different ways to finance mangrove, and we don't have to make it too complicated, right? And I think the example that Ure Jacapolo from Liberia gave, we can invest in mangrove positive business by providing renewable energy to local communities that rather to cut trees can, dry their fish. This is investing in mangrove restoration and will help us reach the 15 million hectares of mangrove restored and protected by 2030. So my point here is that try to make it simple, right? We are trying to build massive model, carbon credits, carbon accounting, and many other, which hopefully will work and will be one stream of findings. But there are many other ways that we can find mangrove, right? And this is what the Mangrove Breakthrough is trying to implement also through, in working with local banks and local investors, is to think differently and maybe more simply about putting money into nature. Looking ahead, so yes, we've launched the secretariat, or very soon we are doing the final round of interviews for several members, so that's very, very exciting. The secretariat will, not be an event planner, it will be a convener and a doer. The secretariat is put together to do three things: deals making, include mangrove in NDCs, and build a solid pipeline of projects. There is also a critical piece around accountability that we need to do together, because this is also about the credibility of the product, right? If we are able to measure progress, we will do much better. Finally, the next big ticket item for the Mangrove Breakthrough is, I do believe, is that we are looking to launch one global financing facility for mangrove. This is a project that we hope to launch and have initial capital investment by COP30. Really, the idea here is, again, think about the collective, because one financial institution, one NGO, one insurer can maybe do one good project, but we will never reach the scale. So how do we bring all the capital together, organize a stack of capital, de-risk collective investment, and strengthen the pipeline? So this is a project that will come to maturity in the coming weeks and months. So stay tuned, and would love to have as many of you coming together to launch this global finance facility for mangrove at COP30. We can really make a blueprint in the world with this work on how do we finance nature. And that's what really struck me and excites me about this work, is that we can tell the world it's actually possible to put money into mangrove and look into nature, look at the way we've done for mangrove. It can be replicated for other ecosystems. So let's do it and have a great climate week in New York.